What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yugioh deck of the day. Today we're doing an update on Kozmo, a deck that I haven't touched in quite a while because unfortunately this deck hasn't got any new support in the past few years. Only we've been getting indirect support with a couple of cards that can interact very well with the deck. So I think that now that everything has had a reprint, because Ghosts from the Past reprinted everything that did not have a reprint yet, like Dark Lady, Tinka, and Kozmo, now everyone who wanted to pick up the deck can pick it up for free. The deck is very cheap. So I think now that a lot of people are going to have it, it's time to do an update on the deck to show you exactly how the deck should be played in the current format, what has changed about the deck, what has stayed the same. So before we begin with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So starting off with the ships of the deck, you have to play 3 copies of Kozmo Dark Destroyer. The ratios are interchangeable, but this has to be a 3-of. This is the main source of the deck that you're going to be disrupting your opponent and you're going to be attacking with. This card is absolutely insane. A 300 attacker that's untargetable, that destroys a monster on summon, and it floats to other big ships when it's destroyed. Yes, this card is by far the best card of the deck, and you have to max it out since it's a 3. It was a 1 some time ago, but it has been a 3 for quite a while now. So the deck, aside from Emergency Teleport, which is still at 1, pretty much has all the tools it needs in order to be able to be a really good deck. You have to know exactly what you should do with the deck, and I'll explain the strengths and the weaknesses of the deck as I go through with the deck. 2 copies of Slip Rider. This used to be a 3-of, but I think in this current format you don't really need to max it out because stuff like Eldritch exists, so you don't really want to pop backer against everything, but it's still a really good option to have, and it's a level 5 machine, so you can see where this is going. You usually don't really care about your extra deck in this deck, but being able to summon a Nova and Infinity with 2 Slip Riders sometimes can come up and sometimes can win you a game. 1 copy of Dark Eclipser. This is another monster that's very hard to deal with, just like Destroyer. It's an untargetable ship with 3000 attack. Unfortunately, it doesn't special summon when it's destroyed. It adds 1 monster with level 8 or lower from your deck to your hand, but still it's not a bad effect. You can search your Destroyer, and if you have another pilot on the field, you can pop another card. And the main reason this card is here is because of its effect to negate trap cards against rogue matchups or against Eldritch. Getting this on the field with a Tinkan that fuels your graveyard with Kozmos, you can actually negate a lot of traps and you can win the game just like that. So I think you have to play 1. And the last ship is 1 copy of Forerunner. Forerunner is here because the main reason this deck loses, it almost loses to itself like half of the time because it burns itself out of life points. So you need this just to make sure that you don't lose right away, so you can get some life points back. And you can also win in time with this card, because if you just search with a Tinkan, you pay 500 for Tinkan, but you gain 1000 during your standby phase with Forerunner. So maybe you can steal a game just like that, because this deck is notorious for losing in time, but with this card sometimes you can surprise your opponent and actually win in time by gaining life. For the pilots, we start with 2 copies of Dark Lady. I like Dark Lady because she can act both as a pilot and as a ship, because you usually tag her out with another pilot in order to get her on the field to get a negate, and after you've used her negate effect, then you can use her effect to tag out to get a Destroyer, so you can use her both as a ship and a pilot to get both disruptions. So I really like this card, and I think you should be playing 2, because you don't really care about breaking the deck, because you can always mulligan your hand with Kozmo Town, so it like draw too many ships or too many pilots, you have a second chance of drawing something good. So I think the deck's possibility of breaking is much less than any deck that would play so many high-level monsters, because if you don't draw a pilot, then you're basically screwed. But I do play a lot of cards that get you pilots on the field, and more than 1, because that's one of the weaknesses of the deck. I'll discuss a little later. So this is why I think Dark Lady is a really good 2-of. 3 copies of Tinkan. Along with Dark Destroyer, this card is the only card you should be playing at 3, 100% maybe. Kozmo Town can be argued with that, but I've seen people play less than 3 Kozmo Town, and I can understand that because you don't really want to draw multiples. And it's a card that once you have on the field, your opponent is basically never going to destroy it because they know you're going to +1 do. So Tinkan, a really great card. You search 3 during your end phase. 1 of them is going to your hand, the rest are going to the grave. You don't really care about them going to the grave because you have a lot of cards that can get them back from the grave. You have Sword Troopers. You play also traps that revive monsters from the grave, because the search is random. So if Dark Lady or Dark Destroyer go to the grave and maybe you unfortunately get a Slip Rider in your hand and you can't do much with it, you need to be able to get back those 2 good monsters that went to the grave so you can disrupt your opponent. 1 copy of Farm Girl. There are some OTKs with this card, and I think going second, the deck can struggle a little bit, but this card makes it a little easier, because once you destroy your opponent's board by using cards, maybe you've interrupted them with hand traps, being able to use Tinkan is not very optimal going second, because you have to wait till the end phase. But this card, once it deals battle damage, you search any Kozmo card, and being able to use Destroyer to maybe pop itself or pop your Kozmo Town, get more searches, you can OTK very easily with the deck. 1 copy of Sword Troopers. I usually search this with Tinkan in order to be able to make sure that Dark Lady comes back, because when you search insert a Dark Lady, a Dark Destroyer, and a Sword Troopers with your tin can, no matter what you get in your hand, you're going to have a guaranteed follow-up, even if you do not have any traps. As long as you don't lose right away, with Sword Troopers you can get back your Dark Lady, but if you search your Destroyer or your Dark Lady, then you have a disruption right there. But if you search Destroyer, Sleep Rider, and Dark Lady, and maybe Sleep Rider is not that good against the matchup you're playing against, then it doesn't really do anything if it gets to your hand. Eclipser is a good card as well, but some decks don't really struggle to deal with untargetable monsters, so it's not like it's going to be good 100% of the time. So this is why I like Sword Troopers as the guaranteed third card I can get no matter what I'm facing, so I can get a play next turn. One copy of Strawman, getting your monsters back from the banish zone. With this is the only way you can get 2 pilots on the field very easily, by using something with a Dark Destroyer and using Dark Destroyer to pop itself to get this, and this will bring back Destroyer and destroy during the end phase to get a tin can. You have 2 pilots on the field, and Tingle will give you a search, and if you search a Dark Destroyer or a Dark Lady, or if you have another one in your hand, you can tag out twice during your opponent's turn, so this is why you need to play 1 copy of Strawman. And 1 copy of Wicked Witch. This is the one you go to when you're trying to defend, because sometimes your opponent will try to OTK you, because this deck is not the greatest at dealing with a lot of cards on the field. Maybe you can destroy something with a Destroyer, you're going to gain 1 monster with Dark Lady, but if your opponent can go through that and summon a lot of monsters, you need to be able to go into this card to make sure you don't die, so you have a chance to come back during the following turn. By paying 1000 life, this card becomes indestructible, and it's very difficult to deal with, because you summon this during the battle phase, and effects that don't destroy usually don't come up in the battle phase. Stuff like Unicorn can deal with this card very easily, but not in the battle phase. This is why this card can save you for an entire turn. For the hand traps, play 3 copies of Cyframe Gear Gamma and 1 copy of Driver. There are 2 reasons why this card is here. So first of all the pilots tag out for cost, so your opponent will try to negate it, because they are not going to let you get a Destroyer on the field. When they do, then it's not very easy to deal with, so they're definitely going to negate the pilot. So this is where Gamma is really good, because the deck's main weakness is relying on the normal summon. So if you have a pilot and you tag it out and it gets negated by anything, and you don't have a Gamma or you don't have anything else, then you're basically going to lose. So Gamma is one of the reasons you can play even if you have your pilot negated, because you can use this to negate what negated your pilot. You get free bodies on the field, and your pilot resolves. So this is why I think Gamma is a really good card. Also another reason why Gamma is here is because I play Reasoning. Reasoning is a card that can get you multiple monsters on the field, and the levels are all over the place. They go from 1 to 9, so it's very difficult for your opponent to guess what level you're going to excavate. So this is why if you're playing Reasoning in a deck, the only hand traps you can play are Gamma and Impermanence, because if you play anything else, you risk getting a hand trap on the field, and especially in a deck that doesn't rely on an extra deck. Maybe if you're playing Needle Fiber, that's fine getting an Ash or a Veiler on the field, but in this particular deck, you don't want to waste your Reasoning for a hand trap. You have to make sure that you get a pilot or a ship on the field. Of course, there's always a chance of getting Driver, but it's just 1 card, so you shouldn't rely on a possibility like that. For the spells, play 3 copies of Kozmo Town and 1 copy of Terraforming. I like maxing this card because, like I said, the deck can break a lot of the time, so even if it means drawing multiple copies of Kozmo Town, I still want to see it, because when you get too many pilots or too many ships, or you don't get the right ships, then you want to be able to mulligan them back into the deck to get a chance of drawing something good. And of course, there are so many combos with Sleep Rider, popping your own Kozmo Town to get more searches, maybe get a disruption with your Cosmojo, or maybe get a Destroyer to go for a game. There's so many things you can do with this card. The utility is absolutely amazing, so I think you need to max it out. You can experiment with less copies if you want. It's something that is actually not set in stone like Dark Destroyer or Tinker at 3, which you should definitely play at 3, but Kozmo Town, I think, is a really good card to max out too. 1 copy of Emergency Teleport, unfortunately still at 1. There is a chance that this card can come off the list sometime, but I don't know when it will happen, so as long as it's at 1, we're going to be playing 1, but if it comes to 2 or 3, it's going to be such a huge boost for the deck, because this is the card like a Zodiac Varaz for Zodiac. It breaks the deck's reliance on normal summons, so it gives you more monsters on the field, and this is why this card is so great, but unfortunately we have 1 copy. 1 copy of 1 for 1. I play this because of Tinkan, and I've never seen people play this, to be honest. I think people only play Reasoning and Teleport. I know it can be a neck to discard, especially if this card gets negated, but I find that the games I lose to is because I go second and I don't have a way to special summon a pilot. So I normal summon my pilot, I try to take out, it gets negated by anything, and then you basically lose the game. So this is why you need to play cards that give you more monsters on the field after you've normal summoned. And stuff like Gamma, Teleport, Reasoning, and 1 for 1, make sure you do that. This is why I think you need need to be playing them. And 1 copy of Reasoning, of course I explained this before, it gets you another monster on the field. It's very difficult for your opponent to guess what level is going to hit because you play so many different levels, so it's a really good card. For the traps, you do play a lot of traps in the deck because the deck is more of a control version of the deck, more not like an OTK version, because you can't really OTK. If you want OTK, you would have to be playing stuff like droplets to make sure that attacks with farming will go through, but I think playing more of a control deck is actually much more viable for the deck. 2 copies of Kozmo. This is a searchable card. You can search this with your farm guild, you can search it with your Kozmo town. It's a non-targeting banish from the field or the grave, and it also floats your ships down, so you can, after you've used maybe your destroyer's pop, with this card not only can you banish a card, but you can also get a slip rider to pop another card. So there are so many cool things. You can use this card defensively, you can use it offensively. It's such a great card. 3 copies of Impermanence. I talked about Reasoning, so you've been expecting this. If you're playing Reasoning, Gamma and Impermanence, if you want to play Hand Traps, are your only options, so this is why this is here. A card I'm really enjoying in this deck is 3 copies of Dogmatica Punishment. You don't care about your extra deck at all, and this card is so good if you don't care about your extra deck, because you just send NTSS, you pop 2 cards. If you don't want to pop 2 cards right away, you send your Wind Pegasus Side Ignister, so you can save this in the grave so your opponent has to play around it, or if they don't know what it does and forget about it, then they're just going to get something spinned back into the deck. So this is why I think this card is so good in the deck. It's basically the best trap you can use if you're playing a deck that doesn't rely on the extra deck, so this is why it's here. 2 copies of Back to the Front. You have to get your ships back from the grave because Tinkan's search is random, so you need to be able to get back your Dark Lady, you need to be able to get back your Dark Destroyer, and even if something goes wrong, you can still get them back because maybe your opponent has something to negate your pilot right away. So this is why Back to the Front is a really good card to make sure you don't lose to an Impermanence forcing you to tag out to a destroyer immediately before your opponent summons something on the field. So this gives you something you can play whenever you want. And 3 copies of Trap Trick, because you do play a lot of normal traps, you need to be able to get your Kozmojo, you need to be able to get your Back to the Front, depending on what you need. For the extra deck, you don't really mind about your extra deck, but I'll mention one thing. If you want to play Extravagance, or if you want to play Prosperity and you have access to it, then you need to be playing more copies of the 2 cards I'm going to show you first. So 1 copy of NTSS. You just need 1 if you don't play the pots. If you play any of the 2 pots, you need to be maxing out on this because it's the only card you want in your extra deck. Just use it just once, because if you don't have it, then Punishment just becomes sort of like a Raigeki break card. It just pops 1 card, 1 monster, and just like that, you don't really get so much value. But getting 2 pops is so insane, and you don't really care about space, so it shouldn't be very, very difficult to give your extra deck 2 more copies of NTSS if you want to play any of the pots. 1 copy of Wind Pegasus. I mentioned that sometimes you don't want to pop 2 cards right away with your punishment, so this is the reason this is here, to make sure that you pop the card you want and you have something good to make the value out of punishment, sending some from the extra deck to the grave. 1 copy of Omega, because it's very easy to resolve Gamma during your own turn, especially going second, because your opponent is going to make sure your pilot's negated to go to, so you don't get a ship on the field. So this is why Gamma is so useful, and getting an Omega as well makes it even more powerful. For the Xyz monsters, play the Cypher package. We have 1 Galaxy Eye Cypher Dragon, 1 Full Armor Photon Dragon, and 1 Cypher Blade. These, just in case you get 2 destroyers on the field and these can help you go for a game, it can happen. 1 copy of Photon Lord, 1 copy of 38. These are defensive monsters because after you've used destroyers, if you don't want to go for game, or if you can't go for game, then they don't really do much. So by using these, you can get a disruption on the field, and maybe if you detach them, you can bring them back with your Back to the Front to get a more interruption. 1 copy of Nova and Infinity. With Slip Riders, you can summon this very easily. For the Link monsters, play 1 copy of Phoenix, 1 copy of Unicorn. Sometimes you can get a lot of monsters in the field. These don't come up too often, they're just here just in case, because you never know what can happen. It's best to have these options and never use them than to never have them at all. 1 copy of Appaloosa and 1 copy of Boral Sword. Link 4s are even more rare to be summoned because you don't really get too many monsters on the field, but sometimes it can happen and you can go for game if your opponent has something that your destroyers or your Eclipser can't deal with. And 1 copy of Underworld Goddess of the Closed Ward. I really like this card. Just having the option, especially with stuff like Dragoon being around, is so good because it just using it as an inherent link material for a link mechanic, your opponent can't do anything about it, no matter if it's unaffected, if it's untargetable, it doesn't matter, you can get rid of it right away. So this is why I really, really like this card. So yep, that's the deck, guys. Kozmo is one of those classic decks that I know a lot of people like and enjoy playing because of the Star Wars theme and because it's actually a really fun deck to play. And I hope that Konami eventually gives us more support because it's been such a long time since they gave us anything specific for the deck. So I hope whenever they think about it, like with the sets now, any deck they come up with, they're going to give support for. So I'm pretty sure that Kozmo will eventually get more cards. So yep, that's the deck, guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos, and I'll see you next time.